Thank you, Rebecca, and it is great to be back here. Sarah, thank you very much for letting us use this spectacular site. And as Rebecca said, we were here 5 years ago for the launch of the 25-year Environment Plan. And as Rebecca's pointed out, that partnership has been ongoing, and I'm delighted that it was Rebecca, of course, who took the Environment Bill through Parliament that has led to many of the outcomes that we are seeking to make sure we can deploy today. Look, I'm delighted to be launching our plan for water, our comprehensive and integrated plan to deliver clean and plentiful supply of water for people, business, and for nature. It's built on a catchment-based approach to managing water, including with nature-based solutions. And we will coordinate community by community on how to tackle pollution from every source, to have unlimited penalties on polluters, reinvesting those proceeds into local water restoration projects, and to make sure we have sufficient supply for us at home, for businesses, for food security, and for nature. I've lived near rivers, near water pretty much all of my life, from the Tess to the Trent, from the Mersey to the Minsmere, and many others in between. Every river, every stream has its own sense of magic, with its own special history, its own sense of life changing right throughout the day, as that movement of water is critical for the very essence of life itself, for us and for nature. And it has long been the lifeblood of our economy for centuries. The Tess, probably the most famous chalk stream in the world, filled with trout, the gravel bed glistening, wildlife and anglers in harmony, though the fish get a bit of a raw deal if the anglers are in luck. But if the magnificent Mersey, it was once the extremely murky Mersey, which had its raw sewage pipes spewing out, but they were removed, and the river was transformed, thanks to the Mersey Basin campaign, a long-term campaign. And of course, we now see it resplendent with its rich maritime history, and the river still being a key economic lifeline for Liverpool. I could go on, especially as I'm now the Member of Parliament for Suffolk Coastal, which is full of rivers and creeks. My constituency stretches from the Orwell River in the south right up to the 100, each of them with their own tales of yesteryear and being at the heart of the economy and nature today. I've long been motivated by making sure that we do have clean and plentiful water and access to that at home and abroad, critical to the health of well-being of everyone and every element of wildlife on this planet. Before becoming an MP, I was a volunteer speaker for WaterAid, driven by my desire very much for everyone on this planet to have access to clean and safe water. And it's why I'm proud of our government's work right around the world on delivering clean, safe water for people and for food production, especially in this time of accelerated climate change, where we are seeing desertification on a mass scale. And we are seeing increasingly those problems at home too. Last summer, we had really significant drought, and parts of the country are still considered to be in drought. And we were reminded how precious and finite water really is. Now, one reason we tend to take water for granted and when we turn on the taps is our Victorian water system. It's transformed our health, our landscapes, our coastlines for the better, for generations, taking care of our needs in ways that millions of people around the world still lack. Yet the pressures have increased dramatically, both on the supply of water and our Victorian sewage network, creaking with the increase in pollution. And just like many other countries, we are now facing the challenges of securing that clean and plentiful water for the long term. We have growing demand on supply. When we already supply 14 billion litres per day, we've been told we need to plan for a further 4 billion litres per day more by 2050, when climate change is bringing hotter summers and wetter, stormier winters. So making sure we have a clean and plentiful supply of water is critical for people, for business, for nature, and for food security. Now, we do need to take care of water, and our plan is designed to do just that, building on the significant investment and action already taken. Last year, I was pleased that over 72% of our bathing waters in England were classified as excellent. That's up from 51% in 2010. We've got much-loved species like seahorses, otters and seals returning to our rivers and estuaries. We've taken on the micro and single-use plastics that wreak such havoc on our wildlife. We introduced farming rules for water to tackle pollution. We designated marine conservation zones, our own bloom belt, and are now designating highly protected marine areas. However, we still have the scourge of sewage pollution that needs solving once and for all. It was Richard Benyon, the water minister in 2013, who instructed water companies to monitor the storm overflows. Previous governments had not even thought to do this. And as the lid has been lifted, their significant overuse has been gradually unveiled. And as we dialed up the monitoring, the public has been rightly horrified by how frequently they are now being used. I agree. It is completely unacceptable. So as well as leaning on water companies to scale up on their investment, we are tightening regulation and toughening up enforcement. And that is why now is the right time for our new comprehensive plan for water, working systematically at local level across catchments, tackling all sources of pollution and improving quality, penalising polluters, managing supply and demand for water for our homes, for businesses and for food security. The scale, the detail and the deliverability of this plan, I think, puts in a different league to anything we have ever done before. And I believe that will make all the difference. Collaboration and coordination, community by community, catchment by catchment, is critical to improving our water, both on pollution and supply, and we will support that with targeted funding. Backed by government, strengthening our regulators, supporting our communities, I will make delivery of this plan as straightforward as possible as I possibly can. There will be nowhere to hide for those who continue to pollute our rivers, with support for those who want to do the right thing, with the system by default expected to say yes to help deliver those improvements. We all agree pollution is simply not acceptable. So we will penalise polluters, making it easier for regulators to do that job. We'll get farmers the kit and support they need to manage the slurry and reduce the runoff. And we will tackle every other source of pollution head on, including runoff from our roads, banning those wet wipes that have plastic in them. It's great that some retailers have already got the message from previous signals, and we're going to complete the job by delivering the regulation. And I want to work with industry to make sure we have cheap, effective filters to stop microplastics leaving our washing machines. That's a long-running campaign by the Women's Institute, which I fully expect industry to deliver. And we will also be banning chemicals that hang around in our rivers forever, doing untold damage. But clearly the penalties that have been deployed so far, even though we are now seeing well over 100 million, the largest one, 90 million deployed recently, they've not been a sufficient deterrent for poor performance. So I'm going to make those penalties unlimited. I'm establishing a water restoration fund, reinvesting those penalties into local projects to help repair the damage. We'll target efforts where they are needed most urgently, where we can achieve greatest impact. That's on protected sites, chalk streams, peatlands, wetlands. We're going to tackle pollution and support wildlife. And we'll also seek to use technology and innovation as allies in solving the quality and supply challenges that we face. Now, you may think I've already spoken about pollution and sewage enough, but we do need to keep talking about sewage and how to tackle it. Our combined sewer network is about 62,000 miles long. That's enough to stretch around the world 2.5 times, with over 15,000 storm overflows. And while about 30% of pipes have been renewed since 1990, the scale and complexity of what we need to achieve is absolutely extraordinary. Now, we've already created the Storm Overflow Reduction Plan. We expect that will require the biggest ever investment in water infrastructure, with an estimated £56 billion. And we announced this week the speeding up of spending from water companies on storm overflows and other schemes, with an additional £1.6 billion in the next few years, bringing forward projects, fixing problems, with major new projects in Lake Windermere, the River Wharfe, Falmouth, Sidmouth, and the Drake Reservoir in Warwickshire. So we will see more improvement faster. Now, I recently revisited the Thames Tideway Tunnel scheme. Can you believe it was initiated a decade ago? The planning consent went in February 2013. Construction started in 2016. And it's still going to take till 2025 to complete. at an estimated cost over £4 billion. But it is expected to reduce storm overflows by at least 94% a year. I'd like to see it to be 100%. But it's just one part of the jigsaw needed. And while London and the Thames may have space for its new super sewer, wider upgrades to sewer network could mean years of costly, disruptive works in our streets, but without careful management, that could put hundreds of pounds on people's bills. Because the truth is that however much we all want to see this fixed yesterday, never mind today, there is no way we can stop pollution overnight. If there were, I would do it just as quickly, without hesitation. And anyone who tells you that they can, or indeed get £56 billion of capital investment out the door and it's the necessary improvements to fix everything within the next 7 years, they're either detached from reality or being definitively dishonest with the public. Now I am, and I will use the full force of my powers to make sure we tackle pollution as quickly as possible. We were the first government to introduce new legal targets on water companies. Our Environment Act requires water companies to publish information on overflows in real time within the hour, as well as to reduce them progressively. And last summer we had published our plan for the toughest crackdown yet. And I said recently that if we can go faster in our timelines, we will. In February, I made it clear to water companies that it must set out exactly what they will do to clean up the mess, with the action plans on individual storm overflows due on my desk by the summer. We will have that systematic approach and greater level of detail than ever before. And let's be clear, the real challenge we do face is pollution, the source of it and the treatment of it. And frankly, we are all fed up. I was particularly horrified last week that one of the water companies seemingly did not know the reason for a single of their overflows being triggered. That was absolutely shocking and reinforced the need for the detailed action plans. So, I want to be unequivocal. Water companies need to clean up their act, water companies must cover the costs, and it's water companies to make sure they direct any profits they make from bill payers' hard-earned money into improvements. Now, I'm not here to be an apologist for the water companies, far from it. They're already subject to a criminal investigation, but that level of investigation can be time-consuming. So we did ask Ofwat and the Environment Agency what they needed to make improvements and what more they needed to tackle pollution in their role as the regulators. And we included the opportunities for those powers in the Environment Act, and those tools are now being used to create new tools to take on the fight against polluters. So as well as leaning on water companies to scale up investment, we are tightening regulation and toughening up enforcement. Now, we've already increased funding for the Environment Agency to increase enforcement, and now, through Ofwat, we're linking dividends to environmental improvement, to performance, and making sure shareholders cough up to cover bonuses at any company that fails to perform. Because it can never be right for customers to be forced to foot the bill to reward those who continue to pollute. And we're giving the Environment Agency, the power to issue unlimited penalties for a wider range of offences without having to go through the courts. That will happen by the end of this year. So polluters, you've been warned, you'll have to pay up, and pronto. And in tackling pollution, we want to improve the ecological and chemical status of our water bodies across the country. But again, this will take some time. The impact of chemicals and mines long since banned or abandoned will take decades to break down. That's not my opinion, it's scientific reality. But as part of the process of formulating our new plan for water, I asked our scientists to help me understand why there is such a challenge when it comes to achieving good ecological status in our water bodies. And again, we've been going to a level of detail, picking out, is it the fish, is it the pH, is it different elements? Because frankly, I don't think it's a lack of effort, or indeed, there's been quite a lot of investment going in. But I have to say, it turns out that achieving the gold standard for ecological status would mean taking us back to the natural state of our rivers from the year 1840. Now, that's neither practical nor indeed desirable in many circumstances. We're not going to take London back to a time before the embankment was built or remove the Thames barrier. Indeed, we will need another before the end of the century. And no one's contemplating dismantling half of Sheffield to let the River Don run free, but without that, it will never be scored as being excellent, even though salmon have returned to that part of the River Don for the first time in 200 years. However, I do want to see systemic improvement I want to see that delivered, and it will be delivered through our catchment-based approach with an action plan for every water body. Of course, that will involve tackling other sources of pollution. And while we crack down on the big polluters and make them pay, we're going to back those, trying to make sure that they do the right thing and bring up their baseline. So we'll be tripling the money to help farmers manage slurry to £34 million. There'll be another round of funding to help them store more water on their land and more investment in the tech that they need. So we support sustainable food production that underlines long-term food security. We're also doubling funding to £15 million to cover all farmland in England under the Catchment Sensitive Farming Programme. And we've seen groups of farms, businesses and local councils working together, and they've already leveraged in an additional £45 million from wider sources. So we want to back their ambition in tackling pollution. Now, while I said we can never stop talking enough potentially about sewage and what we're going to do about it, I do want to turn to supply. And we are building on this from making sure water companies have proper plans to improve our resilience to drought and flooding, to requiring them to invest billions of pounds in improvements and in new large-scale water infrastructure, including transfers, recycling and reservoirs. We are publishing our national policy statement on water resources, which should streamline and speed up our planning processes so we can build the infrastructure we need more quickly and make sure our water system is fit for the future, bringing planning for flooding and water together. Clearly investing more improvements more quickly is front and centre to this plan. And as well as setting an ambitious target for water companies to cut leakage in half with financial penalties for those who fail to make timely progress, we are helping the water companies in some ways by making sustainable drainage systems mandatory for new housing from next year. Now, the savviest developers have already discovered the magical powers of sustainable drainage. In many places, they're known as a pond or rain gardens that will help our sewer networks and provide a boost for biodiversity as well. And I've already mentioned food security, and I am concerned about the supply of water for food security. And I recognise we need to stop over-abstracting where it harms nature, but we do need to make sure we have sufficient water for food production. And I see that very much in my role as an MP in Suffolk. Indeed, challenges on abstraction has been pretty much the most critical issue for my farmers since day one of being an MP. And using water and careful irrigation techniques for many years, I recognise, though, that the pressures are still growing. And that's why the last time I was in DEFRA, I tried to bring people to find a solution, and I'm pleased that they did. The result was something called the Felixstowe hydrocycle. And even now, that's helping farmers make the most of precious fresh water, sustain their crops in the thirsty, sandy Suffolk soils, where both food crops and nature desperate for clean water. And I'm pleased it restored nature too. The salt marsh is recovering. The extent of creatures there has grown. I've never actually seen so many swans in one place. And for me, the Felixstowe hydrocycle is a blueprint, not just of the technology, but of the partnership approach that made it happen. And we need and have to have that attitude replicated in other parts of the country where water supply is under stress. We'll also be working with the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities to see what we can do to try and make it easier for farmers to have on-site reservoirs as well, recognising that they want the chance to be able to store some of more water in the winter time when it lands. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, I know that a lot of people have put a lot of effort into making this come together today. And I believe that in setting out our comprehensive plan for water, we recognise we have an interconnected system. We recognise we have a problem. And in this plan, I'm setting out what we believe government, regulators and water companies can and must do to make sure that standards and performance keeps improving, as well as anticipating and preparing for further challenges ahead. We are facing into this problem. Nobody is shying away from it, because the public rightly expects nothing less. And I have to say to the public, I'm on your side, I'm fighting your corner. Now, millions of us are already doing this as our bit on a daily basis at home, so whether in how we're being careful with water, but my priority is to make sure that the water companies and regulators step up and do their bit too. So we will make real progress on your priorities. And if we all pull in the same direction, in a sustained national effort, on a scale never undertaken before, we can do it. So my hope is that this ambitious, credible, deliverable plan that I'm proud to publish today helps us come together to address the issues we all care so much about and get the job done so we can secure the clean and plentiful water we need now and for generations to come. Thank you very much.